All right, let's talk about something really strange. What happens when a government creates a whole bunch of rules for something that doesn't even exist? Seriously, we're going to dive into a story that's all about that huge gap between what a policy says on paper and what's actually happening on the ground.
Okay, so this quote really just nails it, doesn't it? It gets right to the heart of this whole situation, which kicked off back on December 11th, 2025. See, that's when Meghalaya's electricity regulator announced this brand new set of rules. And, on the surface, they looked super forward-thinking, really progressive.
And this is where the puzzle really starts. The state put out these super detailed, really technical rules, all about how to price renewable energy. Stuff like solar and wind. It's exactly the kind of thing you'd want to see for a greener future. But, and this is a big but, there's a catch.
And that really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, where is all this renewable energy they're making rules for? When you go to all the trouble of writing up regulations, you kind of assume the thing you're regulating actually, well, exists, or at least that it's coming soon. But is that what's really going on here?
Okay, let's put the policy papers aside for a second and look at the facts on the ground. To figure out if any of this makes sense, we have to see what Meghalaya's power situation actually looks like in reality.
Well, this chart pretty much tells the whole story, doesn't it? It's crystal clear. Meghalaya's power is almost entirely dominated by hydropower, 95%. Almost everything else they just pull from the national grid. So what about solar and wind? You see that tiny, tiny little sliver on the end? That's it. It's less than 1% of the state's entire power supply, barely a rounding error.
And then you see this number, 0, a big fat 0. In the entire year that these fancy new rules were being drafted and announced, not one single new megawatt of commercial solar or wind power was actually added in the state. It's literally like writing a detailed seating chart for a party nobody's coming to.
Now here's what makes this even crazier. We're not talking about a state that has its energy situation all figured out. Not even close. Meghalaya is one of the wettest places on Earth, famous for its incredible rainfall, and yet it deals with constant power shortages and electricity that's super unreliable. So the fact that they're focusing on these rules for hypothetical projects, it just gets more and more puzzling, right? So it all begs the question, why? Why would a government spend all this time and energy creating rules for an industry that basically doesn't exist, especially when there's a very real energy crisis happening right now? Well, there's a concept from economics that might just give us the answer.
It's a phenomenon that some people call regulatory window dressing. Think of it like this. You're creating policies that look really good on paper. They give off this appearance of progress and action, but they have little to no real-world impact on the actual problem. It's more about looking like you're doing something than actually doing it.
And here's how this policy theater usually works. You've got a central government that says, hey, every state needs to have rules for renewable energy. So what does the state do? They draft up some rules that look compliant, they announce them with a big press release, and boom, they've checked the box. On paper, they look modern and forward-thinking, but meanwhile, the real problem? It's still just sitting there completely unsolved.
So this whole thing creates two totally different realities, almost like parallel universes. On one side, you've got this world of policy, all these official papers and grand announcements. And then on the other side, you've got the world that actual citizens are living in every single day.
And this slide just lays that conflict bare. Look at the policy focus. They're busy drafting these super complex rules for solar and wind farms that, well, don't exist. Now look at the citizens' reality. They're dealing with constant power cuts, unpredictable electricity, and high bills. All that time and brainpower is going into something hypothetical, while the average person is just trying to keep the lights on.
I mean, these are the problems that really matter, right? The power supply is erratic, the bills are high, the infrastructure is old and needs fixing, and a ton of electricity is lost before it even gets to people's homes. These are the urgent, right here, right now issues, but they just don't seem to be getting the same kind of headline attention from regulators.
So, okay, what's the big takeaway from all this? Because even though we're talking about Meghalaya, this story teaches us a lesson that honestly applies everywhere. It really just boils down to one simple thing: priorities. And this quote just puts it perfectly. It's regulatory cosmetics. You're creating the appearance of being a modern, effective government, all while the actual energy crisis that people are living through just gets ignored. It's the difference between looking good and actually doing good. And that gets us to this huge question of opportunity cost. Think about it. Every single hour that a smart, capable person spends writing rules for a ghost industry is an hour they are not spending on fixing the actual power grid.
It really makes you wonder, are we putting paperwork ahead of people?
So that's the final thought I want to leave you with. And it's a question you can ask about pretty much any policy you hear about in the news, not just this one. At what point does a policy that looks great on paper stop being a plan and start being a convenient distraction from the real, messy, difficult work that actually needs to get done?